Hello and welcome to this video on New York City and the urban stresses that they're currently facing. After the stresses, let's start with the background of New York City first. Let's learn about the city. Alright, so New York City was built in the 1600s by the Dutch colonizers, and it was once a port city. The climate of New York City is the humid continental climate, which means that it has 4 seasons. The topography of New York is quite low in elevation and it is generally flat land. There's plenty of coastal regions, especially in Manhattan, where there used to be a port, and adjacent to it, on its west side, is the Hudson River, which flows into the Atlantic Ocean, which makes it perfect for trade. There are also hilly regions in North Manhattan, in the Forest Hills, which is in Queens, and in Staten Island. So, the urban stresses that I will present today is about air pollution and noise pollution. What causes these problems? Traffic. Traffic causes both noise and air pollution in New York City. So what are the reasons that there's traffic in New York City right now? Well, first of all, the city was built over 500 years ago. And that means that if there is even any city planning, then the city planners then couldn't really predict what's happening now. And even if that's the case, the roads in New York City aren't really well planned out. The roads that fit the horse carts of then now have to accommodate for thousands of cars, and it's not built for it. It's too small, it's not good enough. And there are also a lot of single passenger cars now. Single passenger cars are a problem as they take up as much space as other vehicles, but they only bring one person instead of multiple. Let's begin with air pollution. Air pollution is measured by the Air Quality Index, or AQI as it's shortened. It's an index used by the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, to have a quick understanding of how the air quality is like in a certain area or region. On the top right of the slide, we can see a multi-year tile plot. And in each line of the graph, it represents one day. And so as you can see, most of the tiles are yellow, which means that it's 51 to 100 in the AQI. And that means that the air quality is moderate for most days in New York for the past 25 years. And as you can see on the bottom of the graph, we have a line graph. And that correlates with what is on the multi-year graph. As you can see in gray, the 5-year average of the AQI in New York on a given day, it is 50 to 100 typically. And so these are the main pollutants in New York. We have fine particulate matter, nitrogen dioxide and nitrogen oxide, otherwise known as NOx, sulfur dioxide, ozone, and elemental carbon. PM 2.5, NOx, and elemental carbon typically comes from fossil fuel combustion, which comes from vehicles, whereas sulfur dioxide typically comes from fuels with high sulfur content that are usually used to heat up buildings during the winter. Before we continue, let's briefly talk about PM 2.5, or fine particulate matter. PM 2.5 is the most abundant air pollutant in New York City. It is one of the most dangerous air pollutants as well, and it causes respiratory illnesses if you get in contact with it. Some strategies they use to manage air pollution includes the 1 million tree program, using more efficient fuel sources in the government-owned vehicles, and adding incentives to use more efficient fuels to heat buildings during the winter. Now let's go to the benefits versus the cost of these strategies. The 1 million tree program may seem good as trees reduce carbon emissions and other air pollutants. However, trees are very expensive to plant and to maintain, because you don't only have to plant them, but you have to maintain them after a while. It may be detrimental to neighborhoods which are less affluent than others. The second one, it may reduce emissions. However, it may cost a lot to get these more efficient fuels. And as for the third strategy, it may be hard for old buildings to use these new fuels as they are designed to use older and less efficient fuels. Even if there are incentives in place, building owners may be reluctant to renovate their buildings to accommodate for these more efficient fuels. However, having these more efficient fuels during the winter means that less emissions are polluting the air during the winter times. I don't have any problems at all with any of these strategies because they clearly work, as you can see on this slide. And to be more in depth, from 2009 to 2017, fine particulate matter PM 2.5 has reduced by 30%. Nitrogen dioxide has been reduced by 26%, nitric oxide has been reduced by 44%, and black carbon has been reduced by 30%. In the same span, in the winter, sulfur dioxide has also reduced to less than 0.8 parts per billion. So let's move on to noise pollution. According to a survey, over 20% of New Yorkers say that they have been disturbed by some sort of noise or traffic sound. And as we can see from the maps, which are from 2 separate years, we can see 2 common patterns that most of the noise pollution comes from the airports airports, and from 96th Street and under, which is about where Central Park starts to the edge of Manhattan. Noise pollution is a problem as it may cause stress, high blood pressure, muscle tension, and other problems related to noise. Some management strategies for noise pollution include the 1 million tree program, various city codes and regulations, a fine for unnecessary honking, and a dedicated noise complaint number and online form. Trees, of course, may act as sound barriers and are aesthetically pleasing as that. However, they are very expensive to put in the first place and are also very hard to maintain, and they cost a lot, which may be bad for the less affluent neighborhoods. The second and third management strategies I mentioned in this list are good, as they provide a good baseline for what is allowed and what is not, and it allows people to report others who are violating these laws. However, it is very hard sometimes to enforce these laws, as sound comes and goes. It's very hard to track where a certain sound is coming from, especially if it's like from a moving car. If you honk, you don't know if it's from car A or car B. The same goes for the codes which mention that certain equipment has to be modified to have mufflers or whatnot. The fourth strategy is good, as it gives people a specific number to call instead of calling the emergency services or 911, which may overflow them. However, this means that the city needs to hire more people to run these call centers so that they could handle these specific calls. In a big city such as New York, that extra cost wouldn't be that devastating as if it were to happen to a smaller city. Further data on noise pollution has not been released yet. However, there's a program called the Sounds of New York City, which aims to make noise pollution data more clear and transparent to the public. Sounds of New York City does this by putting lots of cameras and sensors on the street poles where they would want to monitor the sound. I do believe that implementation of these strategies will help make it viable for those people who live in these congested areas. And so we move on to the general solutions to solve traffic, the cause of all of this. One of the solutions to traffic is congestion pricing. This policy aims to reduce the number of private vehicles in the road by charging a fee to enter a certain part of Manhattan. This part of Manhattan is the 96th Street and under, which is the most congested area in New York City. Congestion pricing also encourages people to use more public transport and use bicycles or walk to where they want to go. It has been successfully implemented in other countries such as Sweden. In Sweden, they made a similar law where if a person using a car uses a bridge, then they will have to pay for that bridge. At first, this law was very controversial and not very widely accepted. However, after a while, they realized that there was less cars in those roads with the congestion pricing. And since there was less cars, there was less congestion, of course. And since there was less congestion, the local areas surrounding the areas with the congestion pricing had reduced air and noise pollution and also congestion, which is the main solution they're trying to solve. And so now, after seeing that it works, the people of Sweden are widely accepting of this policy. Similar results could be done in New York with the proposed congestion pricing laws that is currently in the process. My own suggestion to solve traffic is to implement better transport network systems. New York City is very good. They have robust transport network systems such as the subways, the busways. They have their own bike lanes. They have good pedestrian walkways. However, this whole system is very flawed. Many times, buses and subways are late, which causes frustration for people. And this frustration leads people to buying their own cars or using their own cars to get to where they want to go. And this is the problem. Single-person cars is the #1 reason of why New York City has traffic. And to solve this, they can make the system better to better utilize their transport network, which may lead to less frustration as more of the vehicles are more punctual, which may cause people to ride more public transport than their own private vehicles. These better systems could involve data analysis and using the technology that we have today at our advantage to create schedules, to create routes, or to create whatever that may be more efficient than the ones that are currently being used. It's more about more efficiently utilizing our resources than building more, as New York City already has a very robust public transport network. The whole system could be interconnected. So for example, if someone were to hop off a subway at 9:40, there's a bus at 9:45 which brings them to the next destination. Data analysis could be used to figure out where the bus needs to go or what time the bus needs to arrive at the station to have the most passengers in the bus, which could help reduce congestion as there are less buses required. Moreover, the system must be fast, reliable, and cheap so that anyone could use it regardless of their gender, race, ethnicity, or economic background. Anyways, thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you later. Bye.